Good afternoon to you all, and thanks for inviting me to this annual event. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you this evening, and I promise to assure that the drinks aren't kept waiting. But let me first of all thank Nominate for hosting the UK IGF and all the speakers and panelists for their contributions today. This is the first UK IGF that I've attended as a minister, but hopefully not the last. And I also hope to attend the annual UN IGF conference in Japan in October, which I'm very much looking forward to. It was a real pleasure to be able to contribute, albeit virtually, to what was a highly successful IGF in Ethiopia last year. Now, I know that you've already had a lot of people speaking with you today, so I promise to be brief. I'm really looking forward to a discussion because that's what multi-stakeholder processes should be all about. So back to basics. Why are you here today? What value does the UK IGF bring? And why will thousands of stakeholders from around the world converge in Kyoto in October? Well, it's firstly because we care. We all believe that a global internet is a global force for good, facilitating cross-border trade, supporting people to quickly access information from all around the world. I've no illusions about the real challenges that we face, from illegal and harmful content to insecurity and disinformation. And that's why the government is taking serious steps to make Britain the safest place in the world to be online with our world-leading online safety bill. But there are other risks too. If we don't think about these issues together as a community, about how we manage a precious resource so vital for our common prosperity, then internet fragmentation is a serious threat. Now, by together, a second point, I don't just mean country by country, diplomat by diplomat. I mean government, business, and civil society all working together, sharing their expertise and insights to get this stuff right. We wouldn't have got where we are today with this online safety bill, without crucial input from stakeholders who know the issues inside out. And the same goes for the data bill, which we co-designed with businesses to bring down bureaucratic burdens, drive growth and jobs, even as we maintain the high standards which British people rightly expect. And those are just two examples of how essential stakeholder input is for getting policy right. And I know that DSIT is determined to put expert voices right at the heart of what we do. So forums like this are a crucial opportunity to do just that as we learn from one another and look ahead to the opportunities and the challenges ahead. And those opportunities and challenges are many. Understandably, the focus today has been on how the internet is used rather than how it's governed. And I could see that discussing AI, data, cybersecurity, or online safety is, or at least for most it is, more interesting than getting into the nuts and bolts of the internet's architecture. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, of course, as long as that architecture enables the internet to remain global, interoperable, and open. And we do, however, need to be aware that there are threats to the essential operation of the internet itself. We saw proposals made at the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference in Budapest last year by Russia proposing the ITU take a greater role in the technical governance of the internet. This included policy on the distribution of IP addresses, currently the role of the non-for-profit regional internet registries, and decisions on the allocation of generic top-level domains, currently overseen by ICANN. This year, ahead of the discussions at the UN on the Global Digital Compact, we've heard those same arguments. And at the UN, we've heard appeals for enhanced multilateral rather than multi-stakeholder governance of the internet. Now, the UK government firmly believes in a free, open, and secure internet with the day-to-day management of the internet led by the private sector and the technical community. We believe that all stakeholders have a role to play in internet governance, including governments, the private sector, civil society, the technical community, and academia. It's this open and distributed model of internet governance that's allowed the internet to develop and spread so successfully. So how can we counter the pressure for greater intergovernmental control? And this is where you come in. My third point, it's through this incredible IGF network, which the UK IGF is part of, that stakeholders all around the world can come together to both discuss critical national and regional issues, but also the critical global decisions that underpin the continuation of a global and interoperable internet. So from the early days of the IGF in 2006, I'm sure that some of you over here may have been at that first session in Athens. We've seen this experiment in cross-stakeholder dialogue grow to where we are now. with multiple strands of intersession work and over 150 regional, national and youth forums. So there are challenges ahead, yes, not least in negotiating the internet governance elements of the Global Digital Compact. And after that, we must secure a successful outcome to the WSIS review discussions in 2025 and an extension of the mandate for the UN IGF. But there are also real grounds for optimism. While some will still call for top-down intergovernmental control, most will surely acknowledge the critical role played by stakeholders. We need only to think back to the COVID pandemic, where businesses and the technical community ensured that the internet delivered the services that we all needed to both continue to work and stay as safe as we could. And in many other areas, such as building community networks in Africa, stakeholders also play a critical role. If we get it right, we can build an internet that works for everyone, bringing prosperity, security, and opportunity to communities in every corner of the globe. And together, I'm really confident that we will. Thank you. Good afternoon to you all.
Nigel, can I ask that you come to the front? As a reminder, for asking questions in the room, please raise your hand and switch on the microphone when asked to do so. If anybody is online, please submit your questions through the question function, and Ellis will read them out to the room. And then we'll also be holding the Q&A, as we have done throughout the day, in compliance with the IGF Code of Conduct. Yes, yeah. Do we have any questions in the room?
Ian Corby from the Age Verification Providers Association. One of the things that sort of makes the world go round in technology and on the internet is international standards. But these rely at the moment heavily on volunteers to give an awful a lot of time, quite often in the middle of the night, because you're communicating with Tokyo or the west coast of the US, to generate these standards. And technical authors in particular have to do a huge amount of work processing comments and so on. Do you think there's any chance the government would create an equivalent to the funding which was available when we were in the EU to support individual technical authors? And I'm not asking for myself, I hasten to point out.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, thank you very much. First of all, I should probably introduce myself. I work for the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. I'm not an advisor on data protection. I mean, I was one, but so to speak, during Brexit for a while. But I now sort of head up the internet governance team in DSIT, and that's why I'm involved in the IGF process and a number of other processes. And it's a great delight always to be at the UK IGF, and many thanks to Nominate. And I will remember your question, but I just wanted to make that clear. And also that I just wanted to explain why the minister had agreed to actually come here. I promised him a good beer, and so he instantly agreed. He agreed to be here. Unfortunately, he's got legislation going through the House, so we agreed that he would do this address virtually. And as at lunchtime, he unfortunately clarified that because he would actually have to be away from his desk, he wouldn't be able to do this virtually at 5 o'clock. So he did a pre-recorded video, and thanks to the abilities of the people here in Nominate, we were able to show that video. Now, I can't pretend to answer the sort of questions that he would have answered, but I'm happy to take those questions and perhaps say something. But where I can't say anything at all, then certainly if they can be recorded, then I can certainly take them back, so to speak. So, I mean, technical standards. So the area I work in is in digital standards and internet governance, and we had some discussion on digital standards and the importance of the participation of all stakeholders in that process earlier earlier today, and had my colleague Stacey Hoffman been here, who's an expert in this area and certainly more experienced than I am, she would have said how we are working in the IETF, we're working in the ITU, we're working across many standards organizations, ETSI, ISO, etc., to promote standards, to promote the involvement of governments in the standards making process. We want to ensure that the standards making process takes into account all the views of all stakeholders. So, I mean, clearly technical authors, incredibly important what you do. I'm not aware of the funding streams, but I'll certainly take that question back. Thank you. Is that, oh, sorry, this is your job. Yeah.
We've got another question in the room.
Thank you, Andrew Campling, and I thoroughly endorse that last suggestion, just by the by. But my question, I think the UK government and its agencies have been sort of very good in engaging in sort of internet governance processes, unlike many of their counterparts around the world. So I think that's commendable. As you'll be aware, Nigel, the Eurodig is the sort of regional equivalent of this meeting, which met in Finland a few weeks ago. I think it's due to meet, I believe, in Poland in 2025, but is currently looking for a venue for 2024. So perhaps a question to take away is whether the government would support the idea of the 2024 meeting being hosted in the UK, and whether it would support that in some capacity. Thank you.
Well, I mean, thank you for volunteering, Andrew. It's very decent. You did checks in the post. No, so I mean, it clearly is important, you know, to have good hosts for UN conferences. It was referred to earlier about the global IGF. I mean, I just defer to make sure everyone's in the picture on this. So the global IGF, as you know, is hosted each year, and countries that want to host it apply to the IGF Secretariat, which is based in Geneva, and just say, you know, I'd like to host this. But I mean, of course, there's a lot to it. Hosting a UN IGF, those of us that were in Ethiopia or in countries before that saw the vast infrastructure and you know, apparatus needed to host a global IGF. In this year, as you know, it's being hosted in Kyoto in Japan. Next year in 2024, Saudi Arabia will put their hat in the ring to host it. As far as I'm aware, they're the only country at the moment that have you know, put their marker down. And for 2025, as was alluded to earlier, some time ago, before the invasion of Ukraine, Russia put their hat in the ring to host the 2025 UN IGF, and since then Norway have publicly declared that they would also like to host the. So, you know, it does take a commitment, and I make no secret that I know we're in the public domain. The UK, we're also having initial discussions internally about whether, if Russia was the only candidate still in the ring, if you like, whether we would also put our hat in the ring to host the 2025 UN IGF. But we're delighted that Norway, and we fully support the Norwegian bid for that. In terms of the European Eurodig, yes, I mean, it would be great, obviously, for the UK to be able to host this. It doesn't require as many resources as a UN IGF, because there's not so many parallel streams and translation, and it's not a UN event. The thing about the UN IGF, it's a UN event, so you have to comply with UN security and interpretation and things like that. But Eurodig is somewhat more flexible. So if there are organisations that want to work with the UK government, would be delighted to work with them in this regard.
We've got one more question in the room.
Thanks. This is Sophie Hay. I'm from Cum Laude. Nigel, I know you're very passionate about the importance of WSIS plus 20, and the minister discussed it just then about how important it is, to be maintaining the role of the UN IGF and the multi-stakeholder approach to technical governance online. So I thought it would be really helpful if you could perhaps give us a few takeaways on how the technical community, civil society, industry, private sector, how can we support the UK government with this goal? What is it that we can do to support this work?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Sophie, and thanks for all you do anyway, as Com Laude in the ICANN process and the multi-stakeholder process on internet governance. There's many different bodies that have worked on in the internet governance sphere, and clearly the whole multi-stakeholder approach just doesn't work unless you have this sort of commitment from business, the civil society, academia, as we've seen today. People have given up their time, they've given up their to come along, and we've had such an array of wonderful speakers. So we're truly, we're truly grateful for everyone's participation in these processes. So the WSIS plus 20 review, just very briefly, so we're on the same page. So in 2005, a number of people, in 2003 and 2005 was the World Summit on the Information Society. It just seems such a long time ago. And out of the 2005 summit, there was something called the Tunis Agenda, which established the IGF, which recommended the establishment of the UN IGF, and that was taken up by the UN. And the first UN IGF, as the minister said, was in Athens in 2006. The WSIS process also spawned a whole annual reflection called the WSIS Forum, which the ITU hosts in Geneva, on the so-called WSIS action lines that came out of the process. And these are action lines on commitments to connectivity, connections, commitment to skills. Many of the issues that we've discussed today in this, it didn't touch on AI in 2005, but it touched on many other things like cybersecurity as well. And those action lines are still discussed today. But the Tunis Agenda had if you like, or the WSIS process had a time-limited sort of trigger in it, that it would need to be renewed as a process by the UN every 10 years, and it was renewed in 2015, the 10-year anniversary, and the whole WSIS process needs to be renewed again, and that's why it's called the WSIS plus 20 process. And there's a number of different, if you like, consultations and collaborations that will take place, whether they'll be in the OECD, they'll certainly be in the ITU. They're discussing it this week at the ITU Council, how the ITU can be involved in the WSIS plus 20 process. The UN has a body called the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, which meets in Geneva, and that's probably doing a major report on the UN CSTD as well. And all these bodies that I talk about are multi-stakeholder processes, whether it's at the OECD, whether it's at the ITU. As you know, ITU has sector members. The UN CSTD has observers from the different communities as well. And so stakeholders will, I think, play such an important role on this. And this is what the minister, was reflecting on. For many of us, I mean, it just seems inconceivable that government have the answer. I shouldn't say that. It seems inconceivable that governments alone, have the answers to problems. Of course we don't. I mean, it was inconceivable probably years and years ago to think that governments did. But this is this sometimes is what comes across at the UN when we discuss internet policy issues. Some governments still believe that the apparatus we have in the multi-stakeholder community, whether it be to do with domain names under ICANN or regional internet registries, or the work the IETF does, or the work that various other bodies do, it seems inconceivable to us that those, that will come all under a top-down governmental control. But some people have that view, and what we want to be able to demonstrate during this WSIS plus 20 process, as the minister said, is that the incredible contribution that stakeholders make, every day in every area, whether it is in keeping the internet running, whether it's working on internet public policy issues, whether it's in ensuring our security, whether, you know, and the examples are countless, and sorry I rambled on, but Sophie, but yeah, so there will be lots of opportunities, and we will make sure that people understand them in the UK.